I'm Andrew Willett for A Pro Basketball Show. Follow and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, as well as following on social media at APBShow on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to follow me as well at TheACWillett22. Thank you so much for tuning in, and without further ado, hello and welcome to A Pro Basketball Show. Today we're going to go through the power rankings in the WNBA, as well as kind of the different question marks that we might have at this point in the WNBA season. We have hit July, and so things are coming right along. All-Star coming here soon, and a whole lot going on in the W. And to do that, I am so happy to be welcoming into the show Lyndsey D'Arcangelo. And Lyndsey, thank you so much for taking the time. I am, again, very excited to be welcoming you to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Full on into the basketball season here, and like you said, there's a lot going on. So always happy to talk about the WNBA.
Happy to be welcoming you. Happy to bring someone on from the Athletics WNBA or women's basketball, that is, but WNBA coverage rolling right along, I'm sure. What have you been up to recently?
Just working on I have a biweekly column that comes out every other week throughout the WNBA season called 12 Questions, and just takes a look at what's happened the past in those span of 2 weeks, and talk about that. And I have a rookie watch that I started back in May, so I'm going to do that every month, just keeping tabs on the top 10 best rookies, and I rank them. That actually came out today, and just doing some side features on teams and players throughout the season.
That is some fascinating work. Make sure to go check all of that out, and it's worthwhile. You work on all the questions in the WNBA. We'll start right there. What are your main questions in the W right now?
Um, I mean, that's kind of like a general question. I mean, it's pretty broad because, I'm sure we're going to get down to specifics talking about certain teams, whatnot. I guess the biggest question is, can anyone stop the Aces? Um, which would I think is at the forefront of everyone's mind because they're just playing so well right now, and just as a team and just individually, it's really hard to find a weakness on that team. And can anyone really give them a good run when it gets into the playoffs and into the WNBA finals?
That is really kind of a perfect transition point, because I know for me, as we start the power rankings, they're number one. They should be number one in everyone's power rankings, to be quite honest. At this point in the WNBA season, approaching that, I think like most games played before that second loss record of all time, and they've just been so dominant. Are there any questions that you have about this Aces team that maybe could give them trouble later in the year?
I know that people talk about fatigue. They play largely a 7 player rotation. All 5 starters play extended minutes, and then you wonder how that will impact the team by the time playoffs roll around and you get deeper into the playoffs. But that was a question last season as well, and you see how that played out. They ended up winning anyway. So I'm not really sure that that's going to be too much of a factor. I think it's more a question about bench production and what they can get out of the minutes, those impactful minutes that that bench players actually do get on the floor for. But I mean, the numbers are insane. They're shooting like almost 57% effective field goal, which is first in the league. 50% average field goal average across the board, first in the league. Most points in the league at 93. They hold opponents to 77, I think, and I think they're second in the league for that. Lowest turnovers in the league, biggest margin of wins in the league, first, and they're second in the league for most assists. So I mean, boom, 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 right down. Like, how do you? That's a team that's playing really good basketball right now.
And I mean, it's been all year long where you jump into WNBA stats and go to advanced stats, and they are right at the top of every single statistical category, and you see it on the floor too, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when they really locked in that game against New York. And I know some of the media that I pay attention to was pointing out, hey, they maybe even could have played a little bit better than they did against New York, and they were just dominant in that outing. So I think that's a clear and away number one. Is that number one on your power rankings as well?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, there's the aces, and then you have like the second tier where the Connecticut Sun, New York Liberty, Washington Mystics are flirting with that,
Okay,
and then you
yeah.
have everyone else, pretty much,
I
is
was
how
in
it's shaken out.
they did their own tier. They just do from
Yeah.
how good they've been this season. And I
Mhm.
agree with you on that next tier. I almost feel like New York sits a little bit above those other two, but that's why I have New York in second, even despite
Mhm.
maybe some recent falters in their schedule. But I still think a team or those two teams below them are a step above. As I start to get into New York personally, why is this team not quite as good to even really be able to compete with Las Vegas, or at least they didn't in their one showing thus far?
I think they're good enough to compete with Las Vegas. What you have to remember about Vegas is, yeah, they added Candace Parker and Alicia Clark in the offseason. They were already kind of a super team last season. And that core has already been playing together. They won a championship together. They have that built-in chemistry already, between like the starters from last season, who they swapped out, Parker, who pretty much has been in the league long enough she can assimilate, I think, on any team. And she's played with these players in the Olympics and in All-Star, so um it wasn't going to throw off things. So I think that's where New York is still sort of figuring it out. Yes, you have these incredible players on this team, these all-star caliber players, MVP caliber players, but when you mix a bunch of star players, and we see it in the NBA, that chemistry has to fit. And so I do think they're going to figure it out, as the season moves along. I think they already are, but that's probably been the biggest difference.
So for me, when I looked at this New York team, I was also pressing the relax button. If I was the New York Liberty, I think like obviously the expectations coming into the season were off the charts for this team. You felt like you had two super teams,
Yeah.
and so far that's a great point about hey, Las Vegas has the chemistry built in already to this point. I was a little bit concerned after that matchup, just about the perimeter defense, as well as I think the Aces defense really like gobbled up all of the Liberty opportunities
Mhm.
when they were on offense and the Aces were defending them. So I guess, do you have any concerns there? Do you think it's really a matter of building chemistry, or do you think maybe some lineup changes need to happen for the squad?
I do think it's part of the chemistry is part of the issue. I don't think any major lineup changes need to
Mm,
happen. Sabrina has never been a great defensive player. We know this. Sloot, I don't think defense has always been her strong point either. As far as quickness and staying with athletic, agile, quick step, quick first step guards. So that could that's probably an issue. It could be an issue for them. I think bench production overall needed to improve, but I think that's gotten better
mm,
as the season's gone on. I'm not ready to just hand the Aces, as well as they're playing, the championship, and I do think New York could give them the kind of battle, that two super team
mm.
battle we're looking for. But there's just a few like their tweaks in their play that they need to raise up a level. But also the Aces are just playing out of their mind. Like, it's can the Aces keep up the pace they're at? Can they keep shooting 57% effective field goal percentage? That's a question too.
Well, and Lyndsey, I just think it's such a wonderful formula they have going on down there in Las Vegas, where
Mhm.
I mean you've got the two bigs, one on either side, who can do a lot of different things. You can just pass it down to Asia Wilson to dominate for an entire game. I think Chelsea Gray's got a wonderful argument for maybe the best player in the W right now, the way that she's been playing since late last season and through the playoffs and to start this season. To go along with Jeff Young and Chelsea Plum and Candace Parker. It's just a lot going on there. That I really think it's kind of a bad matchup for New York in terms of, you mentioned the perimeter defense. So I'll be interested to see how New York adjusts, but I still have them above those other two teams in that tier that you mentioned, Connecticut and Washington. Do you have it in that same order in terms of power rankings right now?
I think, well, I do my weekly power ranking, so I base it on not only what's going on during the season, but weekly play, and then how teams perform against, the criteria is basically matchups, um, margin of win or loss, overall record, and then, how well you played. So right now, this past week, I have the Aces have always been, they haven't been knocked out of that number one spot. But I swapped the Sun out for the Liberty. I believe I had Liberty 3 and Sun second in the previous week. So I also moved New York up.
Yeah,
So right now it's Aces Liberty for this week. Yeah.
I think that's really fair as well with Connecticut. I just think like New York, obviously Washington gave them a little bit of trouble, but they've taken care of Connecticut. They did beat Washington last time in a really fun overtime game. Um, we'll glance through those other two teams. Connecticut. My question for you was like, without Bree Jones, does this team have any realistic shot of winning the title, like competing with the Aces and the Liberty?
Yeah. If you watched their game against the Storm last night, I think they blew out the Storm in the first quarter, and like six players were in double digits. It was insane, what they were able to do. But so my concern without Jones, who's having a great season, is so unfortunate that she went down with an Achilles injury, is how they would match up against teams with strong interior um, post players, like the Aces. And then you have, New York has some good inside play, and then other teams too could give them trouble in that regard, like the Dallas Wings. Now that Tierra McCown is back, but that what they've been able to do is just sort of spread the floor more because you don't have Jones in there clogging the lane, and so there's back cuts happening all over the place. There's drives through the lane and kickouts happening, and then they're hitting shots, and that's exactly what they did last night. They hit shots, and Jones was averaging 15 points per game. They have to replace that somehow. So role players are going to have to step up. And Dejanay Carrington, we've seen what she can do. It's I think Tiffany Hayes really came alive last night as well. They have scores. They still have Alyssa Thomas. They still have Dewana Bonner. They just need some role players to really step up and contribute. So I'm after watching what they've done, but especially what they did last night. I know it was against Seattle, who's been struggling, but I also think it gave us some insight into how they're gonna play without Jones going forward.
And I'm also kind of in love with that style of play. That's like what kind of my obviously upset about the Bree Jones injury, but running more through Alyssa Thomas, who I just love her game and being able to space a little bit more for Connecticut. I think it's super exciting for this squad. I think it's really just fascinating that they go all these years of having maybe one too many front court players, and then this year they finally they lose one, they bring in some more perimeter players, and one player goes down with an injury, and the super teams have two very quality bigs. So that's just interesting to think about. For Washington, this Mystics team, I've been high on them for a couple of seasons now, and I just feel like every time I get a little bit of excitement about them, they seem to lower me down a peg. And even like a lot of times it's just injuries, which is unfortunate luck. Other times, like the shooting disappears for a few games.
Yeah.
Is this Washington team, can they really peak at the right time?
Yeah, it's almost like they sort of peter out by the time playoffs roll around. I know like
Mm.
Deladon was playing, off and on throughout the season, and then I I think it sort of got her out of a rhythm when she tried to play, consecutive games in the playoffs. It just wasn't there. But yeah, offense was a big key to that as well, because the Mystics are a good defensive team. They're either first or second in the league by her hoop stats as far as defensive teams go. And so they have that piece, right, where they've sort of faltered and been slow getting in slumps, I should say. So to start certain games is on the offensive side of the ball. Last week, they had really sort of figured things out. They were moving the ball well, they were hitting their shots, and then they lost a couple games here recently. So I do think defensively they have what it takes to like sort of give Vegas and in New York and the Sun some trouble, but they need the offensive piece as well. I like the Queen Egbo trade. I think without Austin, they lost some muscle and in the interior and at the center position and in the post, and I think Egbo gives them that back better than Zowie B did. So it'll be interesting to see how she fits in there as well.
So, I guess lastly on this Washington team, I agree. I was a big fan of that Queen Egbo addition. I didn't really understand it from Indiana's perspective, but from these
Same.
yeah, from these three teams though, underneath the Aces, which one of them is the best matchup against the Aces?
That's a great question. Washington was my dark horse team at the start of the season to possibly slide in there and win a championship based on their defensive play. And I also think, on paper, they have a really great core like the Aces do. And when they play well together, they play well when things are clicking. I don't know. I still want to see more from New York. I don't know that Connecticut can maintain what they did last night against Seattle. And again, Seattle is Seattle. Against other teams. Gosh, that's a hard question. I think with Vegas, you need good perimeter defense. You need to Jackie Young, Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray. You need to be able to guard them, hassle them, force them into bad shots, which is incredibly hard to do. So I like the Mystics from the defensive standpoint, from that in that regard. But yeah,
there's just an inconsistency there.
Yeah.
Like for a while, I thought like, okay, yeah, everyone had Washington third coming in to the season. Connecticut, I had them fourth, so I'm not surprised to see them up here. But I thought with Bree Jones that they were maybe the best matchup for Las Vegas to maybe take them down before the finals. Now I'm leaning Washington. I agree with you with the perimeter defense, really helpful there. If they can get Shatira Austin going and have the pieces, Tiana Hawkins having a great season, Queen Egbo gets it going.
Ariel Atkins is having an incredible season as well. Yeah. I had Michigan. I had Washington fourth going into the season. Okay. I did have the Sun ahead of them. I don't know why so many people were down on the Sun and like are surprised that they're doing this well. Who did they lose? They lost Jasmine Thomas, who didn't play much last year anyway, and they lost Jonquel Jones, and she didn't play in 2020, and Bree Jones stepped up then as a starter and did extremely well. So losing those two pieces, I was like, what? I don't know why are people thinking they're not going to be as good? So they're not a surprise to me at all.
I'm right there with you. Like I said, I had him fourth. I had Stephanie White, my coach of the year. I chose Bree Jones as my MVP when I was going back and forth between her and Alyssa Thomas. I wish I would have gone with Alyssa Thomas, who is my current MVP. I'm a big fan of what Connecticut has done. I think you look at maybe the optics of losing a Jonquel Jones, a former MVP like that.
I agree. I think it was more optics than anything else, because like some of the main pieces are still there, and Stephanie White's a great coach.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I've been really impressed with I don't even know if I expected the hot start that they got out to. Then even just more so unfortunate that Bree Jones is out for the rest of the season. So I think we've gone through kind of that top four teams, and I think that's an overarching look as well. Is the top four elite teams to very good teams, and now this middle of the range patch, which has been so interesting to me all season long.
Same. Yeah.
How many teams do you think make up kind of this middle section?
I mean, this is like you said, this is the most interesting part of what's of the season is that those middle teams, because they're constantly no one can get no one can get a leg up on each other. Like, you win a couple, you lose a couple, you win a couple, you lose a couple. And actually I wanted to say this at the top. Only four teams in the four that we just talked about have winning records. That shows you what's happening, the parity that's happening from five down. And like I said, no team can really just separate from the pack, it seems. You got Atlanta Dream, Dallas Wings, Chicago Sky, who dropped off a little. They're coming back a bit. Minnesota Lynx are playing very well. They've come out. I had them in the bottom to start the season.
Gosh,
They've come
me
up.
too.
Indiana Fever and the Sparks, unfortunately, I think have fallen out of that. So I would say those teams. I'd say the Fever, the Lynx, the Sky, the Wings, and the Dream, which would be my middle tier.
Well, and the that's just so tough because there are several teams there that are just huge question marks for me. So I think we'll just kind of hop into those just team by team. I had Atlanta fifth coming into the year. I'm still really high on them. They're fifth in my power rankings after I think winning three in a row. Um, Dallas right below them. I I'm curious as to what's going on there because it hasn't been as good to start the season, since the start of the season. Um, Chicago, right around where I thought they would be. I'll start there with kind of the big questions. What was your main reaction to James Wade moving on from the head coach, general manager position with the Sky to take the spot with the Toronto Raptors as an assistant?
I thought it was shady. I thought it was completely shady. There's no reason. There's no NBA happening right now. There is absolutely no reason why he could not have waited till the end of the season.
Well, and it doesn't look good either after trading your three first-round picks all in a row.
You get
And
rid of all of your stars, and then you sell the farm for Marina Mabrey, eliminating first round picks in upcoming drafts.
you
Like
got
it's almost
Talia
like
Topper.
yeah, like it just not only is it a bad look, like and Marina Mabrey, I gotta say, is having a good season. And do I still think she was worth what they gave up for her? No.
Mm.
Um, I think it was just a bit too much, but she's proving to be like she's playing very well, and it's looking like a good move at this point. But yeah, it just was. I thought it was shady the way he handled it. I thought it was disrespectful to this team. I think he could have finished out the season easily and still made that transition. And I don't begrudge James Wade for going to the NBA. I begrudge him for doing it in the middle of the season.
I agree wholeheartedly. It looks bad to leave mid-season from that team that you've clearly invested a lot in the right now by selling off a lot of the future and then to step off from that future. Still happy to see them. They've won, I think, four straight. Do you think they have really a good chance of continuing on the success that they have had so far this season? Where do you see this team now after losing a very
Has
good
it been
coach?
four straight? Has it been four straight?
I thought
I know
so.
they've racked up a couple wins after losing. They slid, they were on a losing streak for a little bit. But yeah, I think, the refresh is good. You know, I said the Sky would be better than people expected. That was one of my preseason predictions. And because there is a lot of talent, there's a lot of quickness, there's a lot of, good shooters. They have the perimeter shooting. They may not have the best inside game, but then Alana Smith has like really come alive and sort of, you know, come out of her shell as far as, breakthrough and most improved players go this season. And I like the up tempo style that they play with. They play with a lot of confidence. They have a lot of confident players. Courtney Williams, Kalia Copper, Marina Mabry. There's a so I kind of I'm surprised, but yet not surprised because I was like, they're going to be better than people think. And I don't think Chicago fans knew what to expect when everyone left. When you had your not everyone, but when the big stars left, I think there was no expectations. So this is a team that's playing without pressure. Without they're just going in there having fun, and whatever they make the playoffs, great. Like they're playing free and loose, which I think is fun.
I agree. I like Chicago, I think was in a perfectly fine space. I just, yeah, it rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way, and I think very fairly, to be a little upset by that move. And so they've won 3 in a row since that 6-game losing streak. And then the team that has won 4 in a row that I do want to touch on is Minnesota.
Yeah.
What's going on there? Because I think you just mentioned I didn't have them very high at all to start the year, and to see what they're doing recently, I've been kind of blown away by it.
Yeah, I didn't either. I thought there would be some major adjustments with this roster, and didn't really know how Nafisa Collier was gonna come, but she's like blowing. She's having an incredible. She's hit her stride. I
Yes.
mean, she's just been exceptional. But really, I wrote about this in my 12 questions column last week. Is there's no magic pill here. They're just playing better on both sides of the ball. They're playing better defensively. They're playing better offensively. And that's just kind of been the recipe that's working. I also think Diamond Miller is a lot more comfortable and disciplined than she was at the beginning of the season. It's almost like that injury gave her a chance to sit on the bench, sort of watch things, and she's making better decisions. She's hitting. She's got a better field goal percentage. Her points per game are up. So that piece of it, I think, is good too.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Nafisa Collier, Diamond Miller, two really exciting pieces. Part of it could be, hey, they just haven't played very strong competition in the last 4 games. That we could see them even out a little bit, but even still, to see them in the position that they're in is, I think, a really great sign for Minnesota. Depending on if you want them to maybe go get one of those upper tier draft picks, but I do have them right now in 8th in my power rankings, right above Indiana, who I've just been impressed with how they're competing, and then Los Angeles, who you mentioned, the kind of the other team in this middle of the pack range. I have them in 10th, but I still think that's right around the middle of the pack for where the W is right now. What's going on with them? Because it's been kind of the complete opposite from Minnesota, where they have faltered. I think it's losing 4 of their last, or losing 9 of their last 13.
Yeah. With the Sparks, it's just injuries. I mean, in and out of the lineup, they just really haven't had a consistent rotation. It's been in flux since really the start of this, maybe a few games into the season. But and especially when Leja Clarendon went down, I mean, that took out that veteran central piece at the point guard position. For them, and what I have liked, the positive sign for them is Destiny Henderson is playing really well when they brought her in, and she's really getting an opportunity to showcase her talents however long she's going to be there. She's in a hardship contract, so when Clarendon comes back, what's going to happen there. Not really sure. But yeah, it's just they just haven't had a chance to really develop any sort of on-court rhythm in my mind. Naka's having a great Naka Gumake is having a great season. Sorry, my dog's in the background like,
No worries.
making noises. Yeah, so that's my assessment.
Yeah, well, and I think injuries is a great point, because when I'm looking at this team, and early on in the season when they did have some of that early success, they were running a lot of those 3-guard lineups. Leisure Clarendon was a big piece of those. You didn't quite have some of the bigs. Azari Stevens, you lose Chiney Dumate and Ete Dumate missing a game here and there. And so I think some of the 3-bid lineups are very intriguing. I think I prefer more of the 3-guard lineups if I'm LA.
Yeah, it seems like head coach Kurt Miller, who I love, is just sort of like kind of throwing things to see what sticks, and
Yeah.
getting Stevens back was great, but then like she sort of had to work herself into that new system and the new style. There's the Spark style of play, and again, it matters when you have a game every other night, or you play like 3 or 4 games a week. Like when you have players in and out of the lineup, that makes a difference.
That's a very, very good point. And it's tough to see because this LA team, I from the first game of the season, I was like, I was so wrong about this group. I just could not get a feel for them heading into the year. I had them like last place, and that's like
Oh,
my
really?
yes, yeah, like my
See, I
bad.
thought they were going to make a big leap. I thought with Kurt, with the pieces they brought in, I thought, okay, this is a team that's going to make the biggest leap from last year, and unfortunately, injuries have played a role.
And I questioned the shooting. I didn't know. I thought it was a lot of bigs down low, not very many forwards. And yeah, I underrated the amount that Kurt Miller would help and as immediately as he has. And obviously Neto Dumite, I knew was awesome. But I really flipped them and Phoenix in terms of my expectations heading into the year, and that would be my one falter spot. But that's kind of my mid tier here in the power rankings, where I go Atlanta. I believe I have Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, Minnesota, Indiana, and then LA. How do your power rankings shape up right now?
Um, Trying to think what I had last week. I mean, probably similar. I know that those teams that you just mentioned were in the middle tier for me, and then we're coming up on the bottom three. Although I have the Sparks in the bottom three now, along with
Okay.
Seattle and Phoenix dragging up the rear.
Yep. Yeah, Phoenix. It's a bummer that Nikki Blue taking over as the head coach. I think one of my questions for you was largest disappointment for me, just based off my expectation to start. I told you I had them flipped with LA, just kind of in the middle of the standings, and Phoenix has not looked good whatsoever. Are there any signs of improvement for this team?
Well, you hope that after Vanessa Nygaard stepped down, that Nikki Blue coming in, there would be like a spark somewhere. And I think there is. I mean, they almost beat the Liberty the other night. And so I think there are sparks, but those and I call them effort stats that are so poor right now just show
Mm,
a lack of motivation, a lack of focus, a lack of hustle. And I'm talking about 17.8 turnovers per game. I'm talking about last in offensive rebounding, last in defensive rebounding, giving away transition points, sloppy play, turnovers. The reason they lost against Liberty is they gave the ball away when it was either tied or Liberty were up by a bucket. I mean, that costs you games. And then
mm.
you add poor defense into all of that, and there's no way you can win in this league playing like that. You just
Well,
can't. And
yeah.
and what's disappointing is they have talent. They have the talent. It's just there's just this lack of effort and this lack of focus.
Mm. Yeah, so I also look at this Phoenix team where I think a lot of it maybe like you have a lot invested into a player who's not there right now in Skylar Diggins-Smith, where
Yes.
that's a gaping hole for this team
That's
that
a
could
huge piece for them, yes.
could, could make up for
But
some of those stats.
Shug Sutton has been incredible off the bench, and she's playing well. At, I I believe she plays mostly the point when she's on the floor. And then Mariah Jefferson, I think, is a good substitute. Is she Skylar Diggins-Smith? No, but she's a good substitute. So I don't think they fell off too much. Although missing an all-star like Skylar's, like you said, it leaves a gaping hole. But they had enough to sort of to 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 muscle through the season with, I guess. And then yes, we didn't know how Griner was going to play when she got back, but again, Brittany's playing way better than people expected. Her she's she's not as fatigued as I think people thought she was going to be. She's in better shape, and that's going to increase as the season goes on. But she's still putting up big numbers, And there's no reason why with her um, playing the center, and then you got Brianna Turner, who is an incredible rebounder, that their rebounding is just so poor. And it's hard to it's hustle. I mean, rebounding is really all about hustle. Um, and that's why I call them, that's an effort stat for me. Um, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I expected more, I guess, than
Yeah.
what they've with the product that they've put out. So,
This
so real quickly, I just want to mention Seattle Storm because we didn't get to talk about them, and I do have them in my lower tier teams, but I think there's a lot of potential there. I think Ivana Jokic is come on as one of the better rookies this year. I mean, she started off slow, but she's really taken over that point guard role, which was like a question mark coming in for Seattle this season. And then with the signing of Gabby Williams, when she's able to play, she's going to help take some of that scoring pressure off of Jewel Lloyd's shoulders on offense, and I think she'll be able to help them on defense as well, on the wings and everything. So guarding wings, that'll be helpful for Seattle as well. So I'm interested to see how that switches things up for them going forward.
I am also very excited to see Gabby Williams back in the W. I thought it was a really fun pickup for them when they had Bree Stewart. I think it's even more interesting now that
Mm-hmm.
Gabby Williams might have a little bit more open runway with a
Mm-hmm.
team like Seattle. And even if it doesn't make a huge difference in the win-loss column, I think it makes this team better. They already showed a little bit or a few signs of competing just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, agree.
Very
Agree.
like I love to see that happen. But they are still down there. Again, excited about Seattle. As we get through the end of this power rankings list, I think there are a lot of takeaways that we've been able to talk about as we've gone through a lot of the questions. I know I'll run through my list before asking you any top tier takeaways around the W, but I have the Aces 1, New York still at 2 for me,
Mhm.
followed by Connecticut and Washington, kind of that top tier with the
Yeah.
elite teams at the very top.
Mhm.
Middle of the pack, I run it with Atlanta. I don't know why. I just have something
You're
for
high on Atlanta.
uh-huh. Something about that Atlanta Dream Team, whether it's Ryan Howard going off for 43 points. But they just bring me along for what they've
Mhm.
got going, especially in terms of versatility. Dallas, Chicago, Minnesota, Indiana. I had them in ninth coming into the year. They're ninth in my power rankings now. Ahead of the Sparks, who shockingly ahead of the Sparks in my opinion, with Seattle and Phoenix rounding things out. But yeah, any top tier takeaways around the W for you at this point in the season?
Well, I think, I agree with your top four teams. That's how I had my weekly power rankings this week. I think we touched on that earlier, but yeah, that again, that middle of the pack, I mean, there's you could swap out positions, I think, and it would still make sense. Right now those last three teams are LA, Seattle, and Phoenix for me. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with that middle of the pack, but I think, again, this season, that eighth playoff spot is going to come down to the last, like a photo finish there's no doubt about it. And then it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
It's already crazy to see how stacked up that middle of the league is, and the second highest winning streak going on right now is Minnesota with that
Mm-hmm.
4 game winning streak. I have them in eighth. You could very easily say, hey, they've won 4 games in a row. They could be a little bit higher. So really interested in how that shapes out. I think it might be a little top heavy at the very top of the league with Las Vegas, but like you said, just super interested. Last thing for you here is a title favorite still at this point. Is still Las Vegas without a doubt over the field?
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. Just as well as they're playing. And again, I don't know that they're going to be able to maintain it through the rest of the season. I mean, they're like their numbers they're putting up are just I don't think we've ever seen this before. You know, just the efficiency and how well they play together and the different scoring options they have. I think almost all four out of the five starters are averaging double figures, and I think Candace Parker is at 9. 9 points per game. So she's right there. So I mean, it's just incredible how not only how efficient they are, but also their basketball IQs individually and then together. It's so fun to watch them work, on the court. So to me, Las Vegas is just in a tier all its own right now.
Yeah, the talent, the physical attributes, but a beautiful melding of the minds over in Las Vegas. So I'm right there with you. Lyndsey, thank you so much for joining the Pro Basketball Show. It was a lot of fun talking with you. And again, just thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a great time. We'll have to, maybe we could do some, like, we could see where things are at before the playoffs or something. That'd be fun.
That would be a pleasure. I'll have to reach back out to you. Yeah, again, thank you. Go check out all of Lyndsey's work. Does a great job covering the W, and we'll talk to you again here soon. I like that.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, make sure to follow and subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Make sure to follow on Twitter and Instagram at APBShow, and follow me at the AC Willett 22. Thank you so much for tuning in for a Pro Basketball Show. I am Andrew Willett.